Good morning. Let us get started with Chapter 11 International Ocean Transportation. In this chapter, we'll take a look at different type of ships which are being used across the globe to move freight from one country to another. We'll look into different regulations which guide the operation of these ships. The ocean carriers can be broadly divided into liner and tramp ships. Now, the liners they operate in regular interval within two fixed locations or within a number of fixed locations. So they move from one port to another um, in a specific route and a specific time frame. The tramp ship they doesn't operate on regular schedule and is available to be chartered. So the tramp ship can be chartered. The vessel size determines where the ship can go. There are a lot of smaller ports where bigger ships cannot go. So either they have to dock further away from the port, or they have to go to a hub port from where they'll be um, the freight would be distributed to a smaller ship, which will carry on the voyage to those smaller ports. Tons are used is an unit which is being used to express the quantity of freight which is carried. Again, ton which is 2,000 pounds. The long ton, now short ton is equal to 2,000 pounds. The long ton is equal to 2,240 pounds. When a ship floats in the water, it displaces um, water. The displacement tonnage is the total weight of the ship when loaded fully, measured by the weight of the water being displaced. Now, again, this comes from the Archimedes principle. The weight of the water displaced is equal to the weight of the ship. So the displacement tonnage is nothing but the the weight of the ship when it is fully loaded. When the ship is empty, um, it is called light tonnage. So it is basically the measurement of all uh, the machines, the structural aspects of the ship. So uh, those all are included in this light tonnage. And again, we should remember both are measured in long tons. Now, this Plimson mark or Plimson line is another important concept for keeping the ship floating and stable. Now, if you let us get started with this line here or with this mark here, which is S stands for summer. When the ship is floating in the water in the summer, um, this is the line in between, um, and it should not be loaded so that the ship sinks beyond this point. Okay, so when you keep on adding load on the ship, it will sink, but it should not go beyond this. At the same time, if you take the load off, it should not go below this. If it goes above this, there is a chance of the ship sinking. If it goes below this, the stability of the ship decreases and it might topple over. Now, if you take the two extremes here, WNA, the WNA stands for winter North Atlantic. So when the ship is floating in that winter North Atlantic water, which being cold is denser, so what will happen? The ship will basically, it will float up, because to get that buoyancy, uh, it will require less water. At the same time, on the other hand, if it is when it is here, like the tropical fresh water, when the water is less dense, the ship has to sink more to get that same buoyancy, and these are in between. Uh, in this slide, we will understand what are the different size of vessels. We have Panamax, which can pass through the Panama Canal. Then we have the post Panamax, which is too large to pass through the Panama Canal. Now, the problem with the Panama Canal, it has got a width which is not really that wide. It is 110 feet wide and 1,000 feet long. That is, this is the dimension of the locks which are there in the Panama Canal, and the ships, they have to fit on in those locks. So there is a restriction on the width and the length. The, typically, these ships carry maybe around 4,000 TEU. That's the maximum. So we have this Panamax, the post Panamax, and the handy-size ships. Handy-size ships are usually smaller ships with 10,000 to 50,000 deadweight tonnage. So they can move on most ports and they can move through most channels. So that way it doesn't have that problem. The Panamax ships is typically, say, around 75,000 long tons. That's the deadweight tonnage for those. Then we have the Suez Max vessel, which is typically around 150,000 deadweight tonnage. These are comparatively bigger ships compared to the Panamax ship. Then you have the Cape-size ship, which basically go around the Cape of Good Hope. These are bigger ships, so typical capacity of around 80,000 deadweight tonnage. The different type of cargo which are being carried can be classified into wet bulk cargo, the liquid cargo which can be loaded directly into the hold of a ship. Then there is the dry bulk cargo. So that though it is dry, but it again takes the shape of the hold of the ship. There is the break bulk, which are varied type of boxes and drums and crates. It comprises of anything and everything. That's the break bulk cargo. But these are not put into containers. They are loaded directly into the hold of the ship. Then we have the other class of ocean um, carriers. They are the container ships, and the typical dimension of a container is 8 by 8 into 20. That means 8 feet by 8 feet into 20 feet, and 8 by 8 into 40. So there are basically two major dimensions, 20 feet and 40 feet. And they are expressed in TEUs, 20 equivalent units. So one 40-feet container would be 2 TEUs. This slide talks about the different type of cargoes which are uh, which move in different type of containers, um, like oil tankers, dry bulk, general cargo, container ship, and others. So in 1990, what we see, the percentage or the amount of cargo which moved in containers were low. But in 2008, which is uh, the one on the right hand side, we see that the percentage or the amount of cargo which move in container has increased. And right now in 2018, um, the percentage has increased manifold. So what we see, the basic objective of this slide is to show the increase of container transport. Uh, the container transport, the cargo which is transported in containers has increased over time. If I go to the next slide, this slide shows that the containerized trade has grown rapidly over the years. So compared to 1985, in 2008, so in 1985 it was say around 190 million tons. So that has increased to 1350 million tons in 2008. So that's a huge increase. So it is almost say 700% increase of containerized trade from 1985 to 2008, and this trend is continuing even now. Now, what are the different type of vessels? Um, we have the container ships, which we had been discussing so far. We have the roll-on, roll-off ship, the break bulk, combination ship, crude carrier, product and chemical carrier, dry bulk carrier, and the gas carrier. So we will look into each of those. Again, as I said in the beginning, like students are supposed to get some general understanding what are the different type of vessels which are being used for international freight movement. This is a typical container ship. It is a Panamax, so it has got that the width and the length restriction. It carries about 4,500 TEUs, 20 equivalent units. So it doesn't mean that it is carrying 4,500. It might be carrying say 2,225 of 40 feet containers. So when we express that into 20 equivalent units, you have to multiply by 2 because those are 40 feet containers. The post Panamax containers, the width restriction isn't there, so it can store or it can accommodate around 13 containers in one row. But the problem with that is many of the cranes in many of the ports cannot load the containers on the other end. For that, the vessels sometimes have to um, they have to turn around and do the loading on the other side. But that has got the problem of getting the vessel um, imbalanced. So if you load the container on one side, and after you're done with that, then you turn the ship and then load the containers on the other side. But that is not a very mm, suitable as for, or that is not very um, favorable as far as the balance of the ship is concerned, but because it can topple the ship. What many of the ports are doing now, they have cranes which load the ship from both sides. Okay, so that can be an option when the width of the ship is long, that the crane from one side cannot reach to the other end. This is a roll-on, roll-up ship where um, these basically transport automobile, and the the cars and the trucks, whatever it can be driven onto the ship, and it can be driven out of the ship. So it's called the roll-on, roll-up ship. So you have those rams which can be lowered when they reaches the port. The break bulk general cargo, again, they can, these are varied type of cargoes. It can be stored in um, boxes, it can be single unit, so it can be varied type of cargoes, and they are usually stored in the hold of the ship. We also see these combination ships where in the front part of the vessel the containers are stored. In the rear part of the vessel, it serves for general cargo. So it can, the general cargo is stored on the hold of the ship, where the container are stored on the deck of the ship. These are ultra large crude carrier, and what we see over here in this picture are the oil jetty. Um, these ships being really big, they cannot go and berth on the berthing ports. Okay. In that case, um, they come and berth on these jetties, and they have pipeline which can pump out the oil or the gasoline, whatever they're carrying, and take it to the port. So these are jetties specifically meant for um, loading and unloading fuel carried by these vessels. This is another vessel which carry refined petroleum products and chemicals. Okay, so they have some typical storage facilities for petroleum products and chemicals. Again, there is not much of explanation needed in this. These are vessels which carry liquefied natural gases. Again, the liquefied natural gases are stored under high pressure. So you have special equipments for storing those natural gases under high pressure. These are dry bulk carrier with open hatches. They are um, the bulk cargo is loaded onto the hold of the ship. They can be exposed to the element because it won't really matter much. Maybe they're carrying coal, moving from some mine and taking it to some destination country. So that's why they have kept those open hatches. These are typically the large lake. Most of these are seen in the Lake Superior and Lake Michigan, large lake carriers, and they typically move goods from Canada to US and from US to Canada. Um, they are not as big as the ocean vessels because there is some draft and space restriction on these um, the Great Lake operating vessels. Flag. Now, every ship is to be registered to a particular country, and the rules and regulations of that country would be prevalent for that ship. Uh, so, the country in which the ship is being registered, the law of that particular country would be applicable on board. They'll be paying taxes to that country, and the regulations that are followed on board the ship and different cost structures like the how much you pay to the crew, the captain, those are determined by the laws of that particular country. Now there are flags of convenience. There's some country which let ships from other country get registered. Uh, the advantage of the ship is like maybe the rules and regulations of their country is not as strict as the country where the original belong. So they get go and get registered in those countries. There are two countries in particular like Panama and Liberia which enable these flags of convenience. There are many ships which go and register there because of um, many of their less stringent regulations. This table shows different the countries where ships are registered. We see Panama, Liberia, they're top on the list. Those are small countries, and most of the ships doesn't originally belong to those countries, but they go and get registered there because they get those additional advantages of their regulations, of the less stringent regulation. Now, these are the countries of origin, like true nations, like Greece. 80%, 8.8% of the ships are registered in Panama, 20.2% in Liberia and Bahamas and all the other countries. Okay, if you take say United States, you will have many of the ships registered in different countries, like in Panama, Liberia, and Bahamas, and all those countries. Again, um, the basic why this happens is because the rules and regulations of United States is much more stringent. The working hours, the minimum wage, mm, uh, the the taxes. So in order to avoid those, the ships go and registered in some of these countries. So which might be tax haven. Their regulations are much less stringent. Okay, and that's why many of these countries lose many of their the operating vessels which go and register in some other country. Now, for the liability, there had been number of regulations over time. One of them is the Hague Rule, which was way back in 1924. The liability of the carrier was restricted to $500 per package. Well, that's per package. $500 would be too less now. The Hague Visby rule, which was uh, in 1968, that 500 was increased to 667 SDR, standard drawing rights, which is again SDR is artificial currency, because companies started understanding the liability of 500 was not enough. It had to be increased. In 1978, there was the Hamburg Rule, which increased the liability to 825 SDR, or 2.5 SDR per kilogram. It also eliminated most of the defense a carrier should use to discharge itself of liability. So there are a lot of clauses which the carrier used so that it can be discharged of liability, but in this Hamburg Rule, those rules were taken out. Then there was a Rotterdam Rule, which increased that 835 to 875 SDR, and again it eliminated some of the defenses the carrier had. Because more and more the shippers tried to put the responsibility on the carrier, not only as far as liability is concerned, but as far as um, the defense of the carrier against some of the losses. So those defenses were taken away. There are non-vessel operating common carriers. These common carriers doesn't have their own vessel. What they do, they lease out vessel from some other company, um, and they operate those. So basically, mm, they operate on behalf of number of shippers, and they get the vessel from a carrier, and between they get some commission. So that's their profit, and they take the responsibility of doing bringing all those shippers together and leasing out the vessel from the carrier. These are some of the charges which are associated with ocean transportation. ABR, these are some arbitrary charge. Then there are bunker adjustment charge or fuel adjustment factor. These are some surcharges like the fuel purchase, the fuel price increases. This surcharge is put on um, the freight charge. Currency adjustment factor. So if the currency fluctuates, which we have seen in our previous chapter, if this happens, um, the carrier puts some of this responsibility to the shipper. So the shipper has to take um, some of the brunt of that currency fluctuation. Terminal handling charge. So again, get yourself familiar with some of these charges. Security, as far as security is concerned, there is the 10 plus 2 rule. Uh, it is again it is being implemented by the CBP, Border and Customs Protection. This rule says that 24 hours before the cargo reaches a port, the CBP should be um, notified of what is the content of the cargo. So in that way, the CBP will um, get prepared, will prepare themselves to inspect those cargoes. The other is container security inspection or pre-shipment inspection. Before the ship reaches the port of origin, it has to be inspected. So basically, this is a double system of double inspection. It is inspected both mm, in the port of origin and also inspected at the port of destination. So security measures are very important, and CBP has different regulations which again changes over time, so that counterfeit goods or terrorist activities cannot happen um, through these ocean um, vessels, because they're coming from different countries. They're large in number. The chances of terrorist activities is there, so CBP tries to stop that.